Welcome everyone to this town hall webinar from A1 on reimagining your perinatal bereavement space. We are going to get started right at the top of the hour. So if you're just joining us, we'll be starting in a few seconds. Hold on tight. Again, for those of you who are just joining, we're going to get started right at the top of the hour. So just a few seconds from now. All right, as it is now 2 o'clock Eastern time, we're going to get started. Welcome again, and thank you for joining us for the Reimagining Your Perinatal Bereavement Space Town Hall webinar. A few housekeeping notes before we get started. You'll notice all attendees are on mute. We will leave time at the end of the presentation for questions, and we ask that you submit those via the Q&A application at the bottom of your screen throughout the presentation. At the very end, then we will circle back and make sure all of those are answered. All A1 webinar attendees are expected to abide by the virtual code of conduct. I will put that in the chat in just a moment. That's also lives on the A1 website if you'd like to give it a closer look. If you have technical difficulties throughout this presentation, please try to log in using a different browser. That often solves them. Additionally, for those of you who have not yet noticed, we are recording today's webinar. We will make that recording available on the A1 website and send it out to all attendees after the fact. Please note there are no nursing contact hours available with this presentation. Items mentioned in this presentation are for the sole purpose of sharing information for reimagining your perinatal bereavement space. The authors and A1 in no way endorse any of the items on this list and are not responsible for loss, damage, or defective items. If we are unable to get to your questions throughout this presentation, please address them to this email address here. That's practicereferenceline@a1.org. We will make sure that your inquiries are answered in a timely manner. Now to the exciting part. This is today's presenters. We have 3 presenters who will speak with you today. The first is Jen Hamilton. Jen Hamilton began her nursing career 10 years ago after graduating with her bachelor's degree from Liberty University in 2012. She has spent her entire career working within the Cone Health system, first as an emergency department staff nurse, then charge nurse, then assistant director. In 2018, she transitioned to a staff nurse role on labor and delivery and has found her passion in caring for families during the best and sometimes worst days of their lives. Jen is an expert and educator in ultrasound-guided peripheral 4 insertion and is board certified in emergency and obstetrical nursing. Next, we have Stephanie Russell. Stephanie Russell began her nursing career in the summer of 2007 after graduating with an associate degree in nursing from Forsyth Technical Community College. She worked in the adult intensive care unit for several years before transitioning to work in outpatient procedural care. Stephanie earned her bachelor's degree from Winston-Salem State University in 2010. She moved to Cone Health in the summer of 2012, starting out in the adult intensive care and eventually serving as a care coordinator, charge nurse, and rapid response nurse for many years. In the fall of 2018, Stephanie accepted a position on labor and delivery, and she has found her true passion. Stephanie is due to start her pursuit of a DNP FNP degree in the fall of 2022. Finally, Michelle Moore. Michelle Moore graduated from Rockingham Community College in North Carolina in 2010 with her associate's degree in nursing. She began her career at Moses Cone Hospital on a cardiac unit as a new graduate. After gaining a strong foundation, Michelle moved on to her dream job in labor and delivery at Women's Hospital of Greensboro in 2016. She has since transitioned into her new role as OBOR charge nurse on the weekends and enjoys working on labor and delivery during the week. Michelle is an avid preceptor and is actively involved in leadership decisions on the unit. Those are our three speakers this morning. I'm now going to turn it over to them to get the presentation started.
In late 2021, we started to notice what seemed to be a rise in our perinatal losses. Looking back at our data, we experienced approximately 55 to 60 fetal deaths prior to 2020. In 2020, we increased some, and by the end of 2021, we had 76 fetal deaths on our unit. This year so far, we have had 20 fetal deaths as of May 15th, 2022. During the fall of 2021, I had the honor of caring for two of our lost families within a very short amount of time. Both times I remember opening our supply closet and feeling slightly discouraged. Obviously, there wasn't anything I could give them that would take away their pain, but I felt like we could do better with our options, so to speak. The following is shared with permission. One of those families in particular I had formed quite a bond with. I cared for their family over 2 shifts, and it was a special case. This family had been through it. The mother had been unable to conceive a 3rd child after having 2 children, and her beautiful sister offered to be a surrogate. They had a rocky road with an early miscarriage and failed transfers. Eventually, they found out they were having twins, but sadly, they found out that sweet baby B had passed around 26 weeks. Her sister carried baby A until term. I started their induction as well as provided bereavement care for their birth. The family was amazing, all of them, the intended parents, the surrogate sister, and her partner. We all formed quite an instant bond and are still in touch today. Baby A just turned 9 months old. The point of that little trip down memory lane is that as nurses, we are lucky to sometimes be able to form quick and intimate bonds with our patients and their families. By the end of my first shift with this family, I had a pretty telling glimpse into how each one of them might navigate their grief and how they would need to be supported in the many months to come. These sisters are as different as day and night, but in all the best ways. We provided bereavement boxes to both families, intended parents, and the surrogate pair that day, which I'm very thankful to have been able to do. Ideally, though, I would have loved to have many more options to tailor their boxes to each of them. Some parents would appreciate a journal to write their thoughts down, whereas others may appreciate something they can wear to feel close to their baby. We needed more options, and that's where all of this got started. While venting my frustrations to Jen and Michelle the next week, I was met with, let's do it. What can we do? We had a great space and the essentials, and we started jotting down on a piece of scrap paper, what else could we do and what would we need? Sometimes all it takes is one person to say, hey, wouldn't it be nice if we did this? And luckily the answer that day was, let's do it. In February of 2020, our hospital's women's service line moved to a brand new tower. Our labor and delivery unit was built with the addition of a large comfort space, which was graciously designed and donated by one of the sweetest nurses I've had the pleasure of knowing and working with. Katie's story is much like many other women that we have cared for. Her and her husband devastatingly experienced the loss of their first daughter, June, in the summer of 2018. Katie has spent the last few years turning her daughter's memory into a legacy, and we feel honored to be included in that journey. From here, we're going to dive in the ins and outs of the comfort space and resources that we have here at our facility. Please remember, we understand wholeheartedly that not every facility has the same resources. We know that not everyone is going to have the same designated workspace. In some facilities at this time, I only have a small closet or a cabinet for their bereavement program. We get it, and that's why we're going to talk about it. Also, another small disclaimer, from this point on, we'll be talking about and featuring many of the items we have in our comfort room. These items are in no way endorsed or promoted by AWHONN, and we're not receiving any compensation for using these items.
So we were blessed with a really great space to work with. We have kind of like an ante room, and then we have our actual comfort room. And during the time that Stephanie was talking about that she went into the room and it was kind of bare, we also found that it looked really sterile. It was designed to be a place that we could bring families, but due to some of the equipment in the room and just kind of the lack of that comforting feeling when you walk in the door, we realized that we kind of needed to change things around a little bit. There was some unneeded equipment in the room, like there's no need for a Panda to be in there. The scale really didn't need to be in there. So sometimes it often got used whenever we needed to move something around. So we really wanted to create this space to be more dedicated to the work that we do in there, and a place that we would feel really proud and excited to show our family so that they have a place to grieve in private. So now this is what we have gone to. We have a really comfortable area that we can bring our families. It really looks homey. We've turned some of the things that look sterile into kind of a place that we would feel comfortable bringing families. We have made it really easy to navigate. That was with intention, because we want anyone who comes in there to be able to figure out exactly how best to care for their patients, even if they've never done it before. We took a lot of time to organize things so that if you're going in there by yourself for the very first time, you could probably figure out exactly what you need to do for your patient. This is our storage closet. Very proud of this because we've been able to put the resources that we have into good use, and having this area, I kind of think of it like a kitchen, right? So you have all these ingredients, but you're not necessarily going to put all of the ingredients together to make one big dish. You're going to be able to pick and choose the things that you think would go together the best. So it's kind of like a menu that our nurses can go in and say, okay, well, I think that the family that I'm caring for today would really appreciate this and not so much this. They have a young child at home, so I think that they would appreciate this over, something else. So it's not a free-for-all where people just come and grab everything, but it is a way that our nurses feel empowered to be creative in the care that they give their patients. This is our room that you go into before you go into the space that we just showed, kind of like an ante room. It's our little sitting area that we have. It was already beautiful. They took a lot of time and care into making this room. We just kind of added some things to make it a little bit homier. So we added some artwork. One of our favorite things that was added by Katie were these lamps, because when you turn the lights down, it gives off just enough light to be not too harsh, because hospital lighting can be pretty harsh. So these lamps were something that we really liked having in there. We also added some of the artwork that you see, the hands on the wall, and then there's a saying there. We had a local artist put together a saying that we are going to be putting on our wall right there. You might be thinking that we just had a fairy godmother who came and bippity-boppity-booed us to where we are today, but it took a lot of hard work and a lot of collaboration, and I can't wait to tell you about that.
So these are going to be the steps of how you get started. These are the things that when we were kind of talking about putting this presentation together, is what are the steps if we had to tell somebody like, hey, you guys can do this too. So number one, create a team. Number two, you're going to identify your space. Where are you going to put your things? What do you have available? Number three is to take inventory of what you have. 4, create a wish list and be creative. Number 5 is what resources can you use?
So on our unit, it was really easy for us to find a team that cares, because we all care about what we're doing. And our team, at least the 3 of us together, kind of became our own kind of weekend team, because we worked the same days every single weekend. So Michelle, Stephanie, I had the opportunity to sit down and brainstorm and get together more than we would have if we were going through, having a whole team of people all together. We kind of came up with some ideas and then brought those forth. So our team on our unit, we have our fellow coworkers that all can come with ideas. We also have chaplains and the spiritual care team. They're great with providing support, not just to the grieving parents, but also to the staff. They can help with funeral home lists and selection. They can provide resources for follow-up care and counseling. The bereavement committee that we have is able to share and compile ideas and thoughts from a variety of different people and staff from all units. Where we work, we're on a women's tower. So we have, our MAU, which is like our emergency department for obstetrics. We have an OB specialty care unit, which sees a lot of early losses. We have our labor and delivery unit, and then we have our NICU and mother baby units. So we all see these patients during different parts of their losses, and we all come with different ideas. We have, through our bereavement committee, you can have future plans for maybe some memory gardens or some walks that you can use to create fundraisers. And also thinking of things like donation funds for maybe cremation for families with limited resources. So in looking at your current space, you may be looking at your own space and compared to what we have and saying like, oh my gosh, we have half a drawer, and thinking this is never going to be possible. But you can always use what you have and make it just a little bit more comforting for your patients. So think about what you have. You can add maybe some shelving or different kinds of dividers that you can have. We were able to use a lot of stacking clear drawer systems that we got off Amazon in different sizes that kind of maximize the space that we have. If you have no space at all, if there's nothing that you have that you can think of that like, this is where we keep our stuff, that's really something that needs to be collaborated with your leadership. Sometimes there's some space maybe that you aren't aware of, or maybe a space that isn't being utilized as much as it could be, and just get creative in the way that you're thinking about the space that you have, and kind of reimagining it into a new space that can be used for your patients. We want you also to be creative about how maybe you could take your space to the places that it's needed. So we have recently been called a few times to go down to our pediatric emergency department to help with molds and kind of the things that we would do for IUFDs, but for pediatric patients that have passed away. So we've come up with kind of like a go box. So the just few things that we know that we really need put in a box that we can take with us where it goes. So even if you have nothing at all that you can say that you have a space, you can just have a box if that's the only thing that you have. And also be thinking about what you can do to make this space more soothing for parents and staff. Like I said, it kind of felt cold and sterile, so we wanted it to be a little bit more homey. It's an already difficult time for everyone involved, and we felt that by adding some softening decor and lighting that we can make it a little bit more comforting for them.
All right, so the next step will be to take inventory. What do you already have? Most of you probably already have some hats, blankets, clothing items, mold supplies. So take a look at what you have, because you may have more than you think. Or you may be able to use what you have in different ways. For us, our unit, we had lots of knit hats and blankets, hand-sewn diapers, and the more formal type gowns. We also have mold supplies and craft items for footprint art, ornaments, and beaded bracelets. We kept all of that, and then we decided to build upon it. So think about things while you're taking inventory. What do you like? And what do you wish you could change? For years, I'd always felt like our memory boxes that we used screamed funeral home. That was one of the first things that I decided needed to be replaced with something more discreet, something more beautiful. A lost mom once told me that she had never opened her daughter's memory box. I asked her where she kept it, and she said just in a closet. I couldn't help but think that if the box or the vessel was more beautiful, would she display it out among other things in her home, regardless of her ability to open it or not? During the inventory time, we were able to go through and take out a bunch of stuff that we didn't need. There were several teeny tiny little diapers and hats that would be more appropriate for losses less than 20 weeks. So we sent those to our high-risk women's unit and our women's triage unit that experienced more of those early losses. And that's when this really became more of a collaborative project. We decided that we could help our own unit, but we could also help other units in the women's service line as well.
So one of the first things that we did, I remember on the day that Stephanie came in and just said, man, I really wish we had a little bit more to offer our patients. We came together and thought, if we could have anything, what would we get? So we got on Amazon and we made a wish list right then and there that very first day, just of things that were honestly at that point just kind of like a dream, that we knew we probably wouldn't be able to have all those things, but it would be nice to have them. So Amazon wish lists are super great to create because they're very easy. You can have them, you can enter in the address that you want them to go to, and you can share that with people, and people who wish to donate can purchase specific items and have them sent to wherever they need to go. So Michelle and Stephanie both had all these things get sent to their home after we shared the wish list, and we were able to organize them and bring them into work and have these things ready for our patients. So if you want to create a wish list, Amazon is a great place to do that. And just don't think about like, oh, what should we have, but what can we have? Like, what's a great thing that maybe you don't think is possible right now, but it could be. With Amazon, you have a great way of sending thank you notes to people who send items to you. We had such, our hearts were touched so many times reading the notes that were sent with the items that were donated, because a lot of people donated in honor of their own losses or their daughter's loss, or maybe their sister's loss. Everyone who donated, it seemed, had been touched by the items that we had. So the other thing is to think about being creative. What would take your care to the next level? Talk to all of your coworkers, your leadership, chaplain services. They may see some things that you hadn't thought of yet. So be thinking about what they might have to offer. And then also think about your coworkers and your leadership and those around you, maybe even people in your family or your friends who has some special talent that they share with the world, that maybe they might be able to donate their time or their talents to helping your perinatal bereavement program. You may be able to take some old furniture and turn it into something else that you could use in your area, maybe for storage or even as a bassinet. There are some people who love to crochet and knit. What are some things that you need on your unit that way? Maybe even if it's just that somebody knows how to organize really well, maybe they could help you set up your room in a way that would be really user-friendly. And if you have people on your unit who are social media savvy, they know how to work Instagram, they know how to work Facebook, that kind of thing, you can share your Amazon wish list that way. And that's a really easy way to get it out to your family and your friends. One really cool thing that we came across was that we had seen a post on the Labor and Delivery Nurses Rock page on Facebook about the molds that dentists use. So they have mold material that's super great and is not as cumbersome to use as far as our molds and cast go, because we were using the mold and cast material from the craft store like Michael's. And we found a connection to a dentist, and we were able to get some better mold material. So that's an option for you also. There are local volunteer groups who are always looking for things to do. Just reach out to them and see if there's anything that they may be able to help you with. And don't be afraid to tell your story. I think that there's a really big, that this is kind of like a taboo subject and we don't need to talk about it. But the only way that things kind of get better for our patients is if we share our stories.
Okay, so when we were approached about taking on this project in collaboration with AWAN, we decided that the easiest way to help other people and other units getting started was to create a few lists of important items. So we came up with the essential, intermediate, and advanced lists. Now, the essential list is going to include the items that we feel are most important and most beneficial for your program. If you have nothing else, these things will definitely get you started and get you on your way. No list is better than the others, and you may find that you've got some items off of each list, maybe a couple off of the essential, a couple off of the advanced, and that's great. That's a great starting point. It doesn't have to be all or nothing. So if you're starting from scratch, start basic and then add things as you go, depending on your facility, your space, and your budget. So this is our essential perinatal bereavement checklist, and it just has the things that we think that are most beneficial. So resource notebook, a camera, a photo printer, a positioner for taking photos, memory boxes, mold and cast material, swaddles for photos, wreaths for doors, and sympathy cards. And we'll talk more about these things in the next couple of slides. So the one item that we agreed added the most value to our room and to any room would be a resource notebook. When we started this project, there was a lot of information that we wanted to tell staff, and some of it seemed a little bit overwhelming because there was a ton of things. So we just decided that, hey, a notebook would be the easiest thing to do. It will be housed in our June's room, which is our comfort room. And my goal with this notebook was to simply contain all of the information that staff would need to be able to care for families during this time. A lot of times, you guys may notice this too, but a lot of times we take on a team approach when it comes to bereavement care. One nurse helps take the photos. You may have a nurse or two doing the molds. Maybe the main nurse for that patient is gathering paperwork and providing emotional support to the family. But sometimes, as we all know, there's just not a lot of extra people, right? And we also had a lot of new faces on our unit that hadn't had to deal with these types of patients. And there was a lot of uncertainty around caring for them. They didn't want to do something wrong. They weren't comfortable. They didn't know exactly what to do and what we could offer. So the resource notebook simply just pulled everything together. I wanted the notebook to walk them through every single step, every single thing that they could do, so that they wouldn't feel overwhelmed. The first page of the notebook is simply encouraging words to the staff. I felt that it was important to remind them that every single time that they use this resource, that the work that they were doing in that moment was important. I also included sections for each type of care that we provided. So making memory boxes and ideas of what we can include in there, how to do step-by-step, the camera, the printer, the Cricut machine, photography ideas, posing tips, and then a section that outlines paperwork and what paperwork goes with what gestational age. And then I also included a section on staff support and self-care, which, as we all know, is very important. We can't give the best care to our patients if we're not caring for ourselves first. So here are some examples of the memory boxes and the shadow boxes that we now provide. We chose to go with wooden boxes in 2 different sizes. So we've got a smaller size that's like a 6x8, and then we have a larger size. And we just choose those boxes depending on kind of what items we feel like we can give the family. Were we able to get footprints and handprints and lock of hair, and do we just need a bigger box to put those things in or not? This is definitely one of the most priciest items in our room, but we did feel like it was worth the cost. It's something that can be displayed if the parent chooses to, but it doesn't scream memory box. So if you were at someone's house and they had this sitting on a shelf or sitting on their mantle, you're not going to necessarily know, oh, that must be for baby so-and-so. And we kind of like that idea. It was something that they could still have the baby included in their family and with them, but not everybody needed to know that at that time. We also include baby name, measurements, time of birth, and anything else that we feel is important for the parents in these boxes.
So molds kind of became my pet project at work. I really wanted to make it something that was easy to use, because if you're not doing them, they're not going to have the molds at all. And also make it to where these parents could take them home without having to come back and get them. So where we were before was that we were using mold and cast material from our local craft stores, and they're great, but the problem was that they took so long to set and so long to dry. So we were left with holding a baby in a very precarious situation for a while the mold congealed enough for us to remove the baby. And then once we poured the cast in, we were waiting a full 24, sometimes 48 hours for them to really set hard. And by that time, some of these parents had already gone home. So that had us calling them back to the hospital, hey, come get your molds. And sometimes that's very traumatic to have to come back to do that. So for the molds, like I said, we had reached out to some local dentist office and were able to get some really, really great cast material. That top photo right there is one of the first molds that we did with that new material. And we were just blown away by the detail in these molds. So for us, we were using the like a 8-ounce styrofoam cup, which we still use. We think that's great. We pour the mold material in, and then also use some like baby shampoo or lube to kind of lube up the legs. I know this isn't like a full mold class, but just some tips and tricks that we have. We also found that using a syringe to inject some of the cast material down into where those little teeny tiny toes are prevents you from getting bubbles in those toes, because there's nothing worse than pulling out these molds that you think are going to be beautiful and it's missing 3 toes. So the injecting of the cast material helps in that way. And also we found some cool new ways of doing some molds, maybe for the babies that are a little bit more fragile or for the babies that are earlier gestation. We started using a putty that kind of dries quickly, and then we would inject the or pour the cast material into that. And these casts that we have now set in 20 minutes. So the dentist mold versus the craft store stuff there's no comparison whatsoever. So we would inject the cast material into the mold, and then in just a little while we could pop it out, and we put those in our little shadow boxes. We glue them to the back of those shadow boxes. The other thing that we really thought was probably the most important part of the mold material stuff is to make it easy to use. We wanted to eliminate any barriers in using the mold and cast material. In talking to newer or inexperienced nurses, they're scared. They're scared to take IUFDs, not just because they don't know what to do, but also because they're scared that they're going to mess it up. So in making this easy for them, or making it a little less scary, we decided to pre-portion out the mold and cast material. On the craft store supplies, it's like 1 part and 3/4 teaspoon. Like, it's very, very specific. So instead of doing that, we portioned it all out ourselves, practiced with that to make sure it was a really good consistency. And then we portioned it out into 2 baggies, and then we roll them up and they are ready to go in a basket. So all they have to do is grab a set and get going. The next thing that we thought was really important was modernizing the way that we notified everyone else who was walking by that there was a really important thing going on inside. Before we used, and you may use this also, a lot of people use different things. We used kind of like a fake rose that was taped to the door with some medical tape, just to say, hey, there's a loss inside. We thought that we could just make it a little bit more beautiful. So Michelle went home and made these beautiful wreaths. We have 3 for our unit, and we have put a little piece of like label on the back that says labor and delivery. These do not go home with the patients, but we put them on the doors with command strips so that they can be used while they're in that room. And then once they leave our unit or go home, they stay on the unit and then are put on in our storage room. All of our other units who would need these have some that we have made for them. So every unit has 3 of these that they can use. Some other things that we have some sympathy cards that you may already use for your unit. We got some muslin swaddles that are in really just solid colors. We found that those work best for the pictures. We have the infant positioners there on the right. Those are important for making sure that your photographs are putting these babies in really realistic, lifelike positions, because sometimes just laying them flat on the bed or the bassinet or even the panda, if that's where you're taking your photos, can be a little scary to look at because they're kind of laying there. So the positioners were really important in getting those really beautiful lifelike photos. We have our camera and our printer. We don't necessarily endorse any kind of specific camera. Use what you got. We've even heard of a unit just getting an iPhone and having that as their camera. But we really think that it's important for families to be able to take home some photos. I know that sometimes there's people that think, oh, we don't want to see that. However, I can't think of anything worse than taking an SD card to Walgreens and having to print out photos of your child that you've never seen before in front of other people. So what we do is we take some photos, we print out maybe 3 or 4 that are really good quality, and we put them in a little photo album that is closed, and so they have the opportunity to open that when they want to, rather than having to go through the extra work of seeing those photos later.
All right, so our next checklist is the intermediate checklist, and this just adds another layer of the supplies from the basic or from things that you already have. So some things on the intermediate list that we keep in our room are journals and pens and pencils for that, keychains, worry stones, glass vials, cuddle cots, and we'll talk about those next. So the top left is just a picture of the glass vial that we use for locks of hair. We feel like it looks a little bit nicer than just like taping hair to a piece of paper, putting it in a Ziploc bag. It kind of looks a little bit nicer to be displayed if the baby has hair that we can cut and put in there. The middle picture is of some worry stones, and those are just nice to hold. They're just nice to have, and we try to include that with each box for each family that we take care of. The keychains are something that we added. They just have a nice remembrance quote engraved on them, and it's nothing too specific as far as religion goes, but we just thought it was something nice that we could add in. The right side is the picture of the journals that we use. So it's got some pink and blue. So it's not dependent on what gender their child was. And it's just a nice way to have them have something to write their thoughts down. Not long ago, we had a patient, one of the nurses on our unit was caring for a patient, and she went ahead and gave the journal to the patient during her labor process before her induction started. And I thought that was genius because if she wanted to, if she felt led to, then she could have that journal available to write down her thoughts and feelings during that process. The bottom left is a picture of the tote bag that we got just to send everything home with. It's just a generic cotton bag. We put a blue and pink ribbon on each bag, and we go ahead and do that and try to keep ahead, 20 or 30 bags at a time, just to be able to send everything home in a nice bag. The second picture to the left is some of the photography signage that we purchased for our photographs. It makes a nice backdrop and kind of takes away from the medical side of it. Those signs are sitting in a donated bassinet that we only use for photos, and it is cleaned between every patient. But it just makes it look like the baby is not in a medical facility, and it makes some very beautiful pictures to have that. The next image is the cuddle cot, which most of your units may have a cuddle cot already. And we just feel like they're a valuable piece to bereavement care. Ours were donated by 2 of our lost families. And then the last picture there, you guys may recognize, Now I Lay Me Down to Sleep. When we were looking into ways to improve our photography for our patients, we found an affordable class offered by their organization just to give you tips and tricks on photography. Michelle and I ended up taking that class independently. And so there's tons of ways just to improve your photography skills in these types of situations, whether it be through an organization like that or through a local photographer that's willing to share their tips and tricks.
And finally, we have our advanced list. These are things that are kind of like the extra, right? You just want to be extra. And so this is the extra. These kind of things you don't have to have. Maybe you have 1 or 2 of these things. You don't have to have them at all. But if you've already got some of the other stuff, and you're like, man, what else can we do? These are some really great things that you can use. So we have the immersion tub for immersion photos. This is something that we're just now getting into. And if you've never heard of using an immersion tub, the thought process behind it is putting a baby into saline and taking photos of them through water kind of allows their skin and their position to be a little bit more natural and a little bit more lifelike. We all know how IUFDs can look after they've been passed for a while. So this is a great way of kind of giving just a little extra oomph to their skin and making them look a little bit more lifelike. We have jewelry, necklaces, and bracelets. We really try to save these for our lost families that may not get to go home with molds, or maybe they had an early loss, something that they can take with them to remind them of their baby, so that they can have something to hold if, you know, our options are limited elsewhere. We also have a sibling book, which is really great for grief. It is not religious in any way. It just helps explain the grief process to the sibling. So if you have a patient with a sibling that's at home, so you can give them a book to kind of explain things to them. We have grief coloring books and colored pencils that would be a great addition to maybe the journal if you're giving that to somebody while they're in labor, just a way to pass the time while they're waiting. We have a Cricut that is great for doing some embellishment stuff to your boxes, or even if you're using it for your organization stuff, just to label everything. We have putty for handprints and footprints. And we have some enhancements for your decor, like the lighting and the artwork and stuff. So these are just the things that I talked about. So we have the Cricut, the item in the middle and on the top, those are the sibling gifts that we have. So we often take pictures of the baby with some of those stuffed animals, and then we send it home. So we have the photo to match with the stuffed animal, and they can take it home to the sibling. We have the jewelry on the right. The putty down at the bottom left is fancy putty from the dentist. It is expensive putty, but honestly, you could probably use some Play-Doh. We were just talking about that you could probably use Play-Doh just to be able to make an impression of the hand and then fill it with cast and see how it turns out. We haven't tried it yet, but we're going to try. I thought I'd offer that as a way that you could try this without really putting very much money into it. The tub in the middle is our immersion tub for the saline photography. It's clear so that you can take a photo through it to get those really good photos of the baby. And then on the right, we have the loss and healing coloring books. So this is our space now. We have a lot of things that would make the room look a little bit more homey. And when you're looking at your space, think less of like what is appropriate for loss, and think more, what would I put in my home? what is something that I would feel comfortable putting in my home? Because the lens with which you view your own home is probably how you want it to feel when these families come through. So we have soft colors, soft lighting, comfortable seating. Really try to avoid using pandas or like any kind of resuscitative bed, because that is not a very comforting thing to see. Also think about ways that you can make your storage aesthetic. So on that top photo on the left, we have one of our storage cabinets is just pretty. And then also avoid religious artwork or sayings, just because it's easy to find a lot of sayings for loss that are, talking about heaven or Jesus or anything like that. And maybe if that is your culture or that is your religion, you say like, oh, we could put this in there, but really be thinking outside the box that not everybody believes the same thing, and just being really sensitive to that.
So now that we've kind of went through all of our supplies and how our room was set up, why does this matter? Why is this important? You only get one opportunity to create these memories for a family. You don't get any take backs. You don't get any second chances. This is it. And the patients will remember you for the care that you provide for them. It's going to be a key part of their grieving process of how they felt like they were cared for during this traumatic event. Providing keepsakes for the family not only helps them, but it also helps your nurses and your staff members to heal and find closure as well, knowing that you were able to provide the best for that patient. The ease of use for nurses and staff members. When you are able to organize your supplies, provide examples, and have access to a resource guide, your staff is going to have a lot more confidence in delivering this type of care. And they're not going to stress as much over trying to find what they need, so they can actually focus on the care that they're trying to give. Striving to provide supportive care that is more standard throughout facilities in our country will only help us drive forward and allow this type of care to be researched in a way that we haven't been able to do well so far at this time. We truly believe that every perinatal loss deserves just as much love and celebration as every other baby that we come in contact with. This has been my personal mission for the last 9 months or so, and it's ever changing and ever evolving. Every single loss that we care for teaches us something that we can carry on to the next. Thank you all so much for tuning in to our presentation on reimagining your perinatal bereavement space, and we look forward to hearing your stories and seeing how you have reshaped the care in your facility.
And Stephanie, Michelle, I want to thank you for all the valuable information you provided, as well as all that you've done and continue to do for your patients and families in your community. And sharing this information, we hope others will be able to think of new ideas of what they can do to reimagine their perinatal bereavement spaces. Please continue to place questions in the Q&A, and while you're doing that, I would like to take a minute to introduce myself and share some great new resources we have here for you at AWHONN. I'm Sarah Koppel, a nurse leader on staff at AWHONN as the Manager of Clinical Program Development, and I will share those resources right now. We have tools and resources to ensure the families we care for receive supportive, individualized, compassionate care. We've created a web page for perinatal bereavement, and on it we have a lot of examples that you can see on the slide. We have the checklist, EMR examples. We'll go through all of those in a few screenshots here in a moment. If you want to go to the next slide, there is a hyperlink there, and I believe it will be shared in the chats. So you can click on it and see it for yourself as well. So when you go to the web page, this is what you will see. The first item on it is today's webinar. Once this recording is processed, we'll have a link to the recorded webinar located here. So if you missed any part of it, you will be able to view it again, or if you would like to share it with others. Next on the page, we have a video of Jen, who presented today, giving us a live tour of the perinatal bereavement suite and the resources, discussing all the features that it has to offer. Below that, you can see 3 tabs with links to additional documents. We have resources, checklists, and additional education. So on the first tab, resources, we have the items listed out as what as well as photography tips and communication strategies. This is where you also be able to find a sample wish list for a perinatal bereavement space, as Jen, Stephanie, and Michelle discussed today. On the checklist tab, on the next slide, you'll be able to see different sample checklists for your programs. The first 3 are Word documents that can be individualized to meet the needs of your organization. There are also sample checklists for EMRs that might not have information with perinatal loss integrated into it yet, if you would like to see an example of that, as well as the checklists that Jen presented today on this webinar. In the additional education tab, we have a link to a second victim webinar that was recorded earlier this year. We have upcoming plans for more education to be developed. This will be on debriefing and peer support as well as others, and we'll place that education here in this tab. When you scroll further down the webpage, you'll see information to join our new perinatal bereavement community in the A1 member hub. You can see that green link, and when you click on it, you'll be taken straight to that community. There, you'll be able to ask questions, find support, as well as share and gather more resources with others just like you. Lastly, we have stories from those who have experienced loss, as well as an opportunity for you to share your own story with A1. It's important to know that you are not alone. Your peers and communities support you. Sharing stories is a part of everyone's healing process, as there is value hearing and sharing the lived experiences. We will now open for questions with Jen, Stephanie, Heather, and myself, or Michelle and myself. We have our first question. If you guys are ready. Was June's room previously a delivery room? How did your institution handle giving up this space?
No, June's room was not a delivery room. I mentioned earlier in the presentation that we had recently moved into a new building. And so we had a big part, our staff had a big part in designing that space. June's mom, Katie, and her family really wanted to be able to provide more and do more. So that comfort room, the ante room, and then the part that we actually do the work in was all pre-designed into our unit.
Then do patients leave their room to spend time with their baby in the bereavement space, or is it more for patients or the nurses, more like a supply room?
Okay. So we are trying on our unit to have a little bit more family integration into the room. I feel like there's a level of comfort that nurses have in that room, kind of being alone and being able to care for that baby without the parent there, because, you know, feeling like you're being watched. There's a little bit of anxiety that goes along with that. So just recently, this last weekend, we had a family from the NICU. They had a loss, and the NICU had called us to help. And we brought the family down, and we really integrated them into the whole process. And I think, Stephanie, you helped with that.
Yeah, so they were able they had several family members with them. They had a pastor with them. And so what we did is we kept the door open between that sitting room and the workroom because the family really was kind of coming in and seeing baby and seeing what we were doing. And I did get mom in a couple of the photos with baby. And then she would kind of go back out and be with her family and her pastor. And so that was really nice to kind of give them the freedom to come in, check on baby, see what we're doing. She was kind of showing her family that had come in later, our room, and why we were in there and things that we were doing. So that was nice. This family was also able to kind of have a private moment in that sitting room. We closed the doors. They had a moment of prayer. They sang some songs, and that was kind of their celebration of life for that baby. And they didn't feel like they needed anything else after they left the hospital. So that was nice to be able to provide them with that.
We've had quite a few questions about the molds and casts. What do you use to write the names on the molds? Do you have something special?
Can you be more specific, writing the names on the?
Do you write on the actual molds?
Oh, we had I think one of them that said Aiden on it. that is a Cricut sticker. And Michelle can talk about the Cricut.
Yes, so you can actually use the Cricut to personalize, and you can buy different colors of the vinyl. And I feel like that really adds to the molds. You could also purchase like just vinyl letters off of Amazon or any store, and then paint them the colors. And we actually just kind of super glued that on there along with the little worry stone as the heart.
Do you do full body casts or replicas at all? Have you tried that?
Haven't tried that yet.
It's something we want to try.
We're gonna try it eventually. We haven't tried it yet. We've seen some really cool things like a profile of the face, but I feel like you have to have a really specific kind of IUFD condition in order to do that. So we will try it eventually. Right now, what we do is we'll try, depending on the size of the baby, we'll do both feet, both hands. Or if the baby is larger, we'll do one hand, 1 foot, and then we'll do like the handprint, kind of like the 3D handprint footprint thing. So that's kind of what we've done so far.
Do you have the name or brand of the newer material that you use? There's an attendee who's still using the dental product, but says that it still takes hours to dry.
So
So
what
did-
we're using is an alginate. And we've used 2 different brands. We got them, the first was donated from a dentist that Jen has in contact with. The second supply that we got was from a dental supply company. I simply called them, said, this is what we're looking for. This is what we've had before that dried quickly. And she actually, just hearing what we were using it for, she actually donated a box of 6 containers to us. But what we've used is called alginate, and it sets up and cures extremely quickly.
And also the stuff that we use, I don't know if this helps know exactly what kind it is, but whenever we mix it and pour it all in there, it gets warm and it gets hot. Not hot to where you can't handle it, but like it gets really warm. And then whenever it cools, that tells you that it's ready to go.
Yeah.
And it's less than 30 minutes.
Yeah, I really feel like any dental supply company would be able to point you in that direction of what alginate you would need.
Were the journals that you had mentioned on the Amazon wish list? Or did you get them from Amazon, or do you remember where?
Yes, they're on the Amazon wish list, and we did purchase that, or they were donated through Amazon.
So I had kind of breezed through it right when I was trying to show all the resources so we could get through to the questions. But as I mentioned, that wish list, there is a PDF of it on the A1's perinatal bereavement page. So you'll be able to access it. It has all the different links to all the different supplies, as well as a link to the actual wish list. So if you wanted to see any of that. And then to clarify for a couple of the other items, people were asking about the tubs for the water immersion photography. That I believe is also on that wish list as well. Is that correct?
I believe the tub is on there. That was something that a local photographer who is doing these types of photos, she had suggested that. It's simply a clear beverage tub on Amazon. So it is perfect size and clear and easy to clean. But that's what you would search. If it's not on the wish list, the sample wish list, that's what you would search is clear beverage tub.
And do you use water or saline for that?
So we've used saline before, but what I've read, there's not a lot of research on it, but what I've read and what this local photographer has shared with me is she uses half and half.
Trying to make sure I get through all the questions here. And there was a question, I think you've answered it, but do the nurses and staff on your unit purchase all these items, or do you receive assistance from volunteers or donations? That one might have been addressed before you had gotten to that one, but if you want to reiterate what you did there.
Yeah, so we made that Amazon wish list and we shared it on social media. So that's why it's so important to talk about what we do and why it's important, because it's important to talk about. And there are so many people who have been affected by loss, who just really want to make the next person's experience a little bit better. So offering them that opportunity is so important. So I know that there's this desire to kind of keep everything, nobody wants to know about this. We don't, we got to keep this to ourselves. We have to deal with everything privately, but opening it up to your community to help is such a blessing, not just for your unit, but also for the families that you serve.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot more people than you think that want to help. I had people that I went to high school with that I haven't had contact with in forever. I had no idea, oh, this was for my son, or I lost a daughter. And I had family members who I knew had stillbirths who were like, oh, I wish this was something that was done when my child was born many years ago. And so that was a way that they kind of felt like they could honor their own child by donating even simple things. I mean, our wish list items ranged in varying price points. And so we were really blessed by our community just kind of taking off with it.
And also we put stuff on our wish list that we never really thought anybody would buy.
Yeah,
Like we put a camera and a printer, just as like, haha, no one's gonna buy this, but
And that's why we say, like, think out of the box, think about things that, hey, maybe this is a high price point and like 7 people on your unit are like, God, we really need that. Well, maybe you guys do a fundraiser. Maybe you guys all pull some money together. I mean, there are creative ways to do things. And so that's why we say, like, make your wish list as big as you want to, because you'd be surprised. You really will be surprised by the outpouring of love.
And on that note too, we were very shocked and surprised with the donations that we received. When the Amazon truck would pull in my driveway, my kids were like, oh, Amazon's here again. And they would drop off like 150 to 250 packages a day. My house literally looked like an Amazon warehouse. And it was amazing opening up the boxes and reading the messages and the memoirs and the donations that were made in memory of others. And we actually decided to take these and put them in a scrapbook and display them if they were wanting to be viewed on the unit, just to kind of signify, like, this is where we got this from. Like, this wouldn't have been possible without these donations.
And did your facility support the donations, or were there any issues with your organization supporting that?
They were very supportive of it.
Yeah, I think because they weren't the ones receiving the 150, 250 packages a day, they were very appreciative that they didn't have to receive those. But because everything was an outside donation and nothing was specifically in their name, and it was just kind of like, hey, this is the work we do. Sometimes these things happen and we want to make sure we give the best care. We have been supported every step of the way.
And do you put any of the charges to the parents at all for the molds or pictures or anything? There's a question about that.
Never,
Absolutely
never,
not.
ever, ever.
No.
No.
Well, with that, we would like to thank everyone for attending today. I know there might have been a few questions that I had missed. If you did, you are welcome to post them to the practice reference line at a1.org or to the Perinatal Bereavement Community Hub that you can join and talk with each other. And other people might have great ideas and policies as well. So I see it was just posted there in chat. So the link to the email address and then also the link to the new Perinatal Bereavement Resource webpage is available for you. So thank you all for attending. We appreciate your time and your understanding.